As chairman of the China Tribunal into Forced Organ Harvesting, and now chairman of the Uyghur Tribunal, it won't surprise you to know that I can actually say nothing personal to do with China and what China is doing at the moment or has done in the past, beyond what is contained in the China Tribunal judgment, which was published in full earlier last year. So I think that what I will do instead, and I hope this will help, is just say a few words about the process of the China Tribunal into forced organ harvesting. It is necessary to know just a little about people's tribunals in general. They are of some use when there is a gap, when governments or international organizations have failed to ask and answer a question that needs to be asked and answered. They've usually failed to do that for what are called geopolitical reasons. Often enough means they're frightened of the state concerned about which the question should be asked and answered. I don't know, 5 years ago, was it? I was asked by a man called Ben Rogers if I would write an opinion about the legality or the criminality of what may have been happening in the People's Republic of China by way of forced organ harvesting. And I told Ben Rogers that writing an opinion was probably a complete waste of time, because nobody would ever read my opinion and they'd take no notice of it. I said, nevertheless, I'll do what I could, and had they thought of a People's Tribunal, and they hadn't. And I don't think they really wanted to, because they already had, from 3 of the people present at this conference, opinions in different forms, but following substantial research, leading to, in their judgment, to complete certainty about what was happening. Why on earth would they want to have another body, a People's Tribunal, start all over again and possibly reach a different conclusion? The reason they eventually decided they'd like to have People's Tribunal was because the absolute certainty with which others had expressed views about what happened had nevertheless been turned down, rejected by country after country, always saying something like, well, we're not quite certain that the evidence is enough. And by government saying that, or something similar to that, they could justify doing nothing. And so a tribunal was set up, but the principles I applied, which I had drawn from observation of and experience in a couple of other tribunals, were the following. And they were built on this basic principle. If we, the people, are let down by governments and international organizations not doing what they should by asking and answering questions to which we need answers, then we shouldn't be too keen to imitate them. We shouldn't be like an ordinary court. We shouldn't be like a parliamentary committee. We should be the people. The people. So I wasn't interested particularly in forming a tribunal of lawyers or NGO specialists, and certainly not the people who were particularly knowledgeable about China. I was interested in forming a tribunal, to the extent possible, of people with a wide range of disciplines. And the Uyghur Tribunal, which has now been formed and built on the experience of the China Tribunal, is even more diverse and even less populated by people who might look like the usual people for such a job. A whole range of people in the Uyghur Tribunal and quite a wide range in the China Tribunal. And I wanted the tribunal to be pretty much like a jury. They're a body of citizens who come to answer a question. And they are told right at the beginning of their job, make no assumptions, start with a blank sheet of paper. And that is what we did. notwithstanding the very powerful conclusions that had already been reached by David Matas, David Kilgour, and Ethel Gutman, he said, no, we're not interested in their opinions. We will, of course, look at the evidence upon which they've relied to form their opinion, and we'll look at all the other evidence. We'll try and find out what the position of the People's Republic of China was, and having started with a blank sheet of paper and putting on it nothing but evidence, and then saying, of what are we completely sure? And that led to the conclusions about forced organ harvesting, about crimes against humanity, but not genocide, that you will know of if you've read either the short or the long form of the judgment. We were not activists. None of us knew of forced organ harvesting before we started work on this. We were not particularly sympathetic to the victims, if there are any, as we found there were in China. We were just citizens answering a question. We judged, and I hope wisely, that having reached the factual and legal conclusions, having delivered our verdict like a jury, we said, it's not for us to make recommendations. It's not for us to tell everybody else what they should be doing. That would be overreaching to the greatest possible extent. We observe that educational establishments, businesses, travel companies, all sorts of other institutions that deal with China have to take account of this judgment of ours. But basically, all we did was to provide a judgment for others to use. So far, one thing seems to be pretty clear. If a collection of citizens with no axis to grind, no background preconceptions, not activists, just deal with evidence that is presented to them, they have the right to call for some additional evidence and check things out, but basically just dealing with the evidence, just reading an answer to a single question, handing that answer over in the form of the judgment. It's very difficult for anyone to challenge that, especially if, as in the case of this judgment, all the reasoning of the ordinary citizen is on display. It's there to see. And in the year and a half, or 2 years, I suppose, since the judgment was first announced, it has not been deconstructed or challenged in detail by anyone. It is a judgment of a number of people working together, my colleagues and me, as equals. It is a judgment of the citizens, and it is there for all the other citizens to use. I mean, all the citizens of the world. Not particularly in relation to this, but in relation to any finding of gross criminality. And therefore, if a finding is made that fundamentally breaches the rights of one group of people, whatever that breach may be, if it's grave enough, obvious enough, and made clear to us, that breach engages in us a duty to do something to put it right.